The current confrontation in Gaza has a lot of people interested in the ethics of war. Thankfully, philosophers have been thinking about that for a very long time, so I thought it would be worthwhile to do a quick check-in and see what things look like through the lens of what philosophers call just war theory. According to just war theory, there are three main components to the prosecution of a just war. First, respect for international laws. Second, proportionality to military objectives. And third, discrimination between legitimate and illegitimate targets. Let's go through each of these in turn. First off, has Israel respected international laws in their actions in Gaza? Several legal authorities have answered that question in the negative, making the case that Israel has in fact committed war crimes. These authorities include the International Criminal Court, Amnesty International, and Human Rights Watch, among others. The case outlined by these organizations are backed by empirical evidence, eyewitness testimony, and even statements from high-ranking Israeli officials. So, on the first condition for waging a just war, it appears that Israel has failed. To the second point, has Israel's response to Hamas's attacks on October the 7th been proportional? Some quick comparisons are illuminating. About 1,200 Israelis have been killed since the start of the conflict, in comparison to approximately 32,000 Palestinians. That's a casualty ratio of roughly 26 Palestinians for every one Israeli killed. As a result of the bombings, 1.7 million Gazans have been displaced, while Israel's blockade of Gaza has resulted in 1.1 million Gazans on the verge of starvation. While there is much that can be debated about what is and is not proportional in war, it's hard to see how these numbers can plausibly be called proportional to any morally legitimate military objective. Which brings us to point 3, discrimination. Militaries must attack only legitimate targets like barracks and weapons depots. But Gaza doesn't have such conventional targets. What they do have is schools and hospitals. Israel has bombed all 36 of the hospitals in Gaza, completely destroying at least 30 of them. Likewise, Israel has destroyed all 17 of the colleges and universities in Gaza. Over 90% of all schools have been demolished. More than 700 journalists, healthcare workers, and humanitarian aid workers have been killed, and approximately 14,000 of the dead are children. It should go without saying that schools, hospitals, journalists, aid workers, and children are not considered legitimate targets in war, even if enemy soldiers are hiding among them. Even if these were not the deliberate targets, Israel has failed to discriminate between legitimate and illegitimate targets. In summary, Israel's war in Gaza not only fails all three of these conditions for waging a just war, it fails them miserably. Of course, this whole time I've been assuming that it makes sense to call this conflict a war. Perhaps we should question that assumption. Because if it isn't a war, then just war theory probably isn't the best lens through which to analyze it. The alternative is much more straightforward and requires no complex philosophical or moral analysis. Because while there is controversy over exactly what does or does not qualify as a just war, it is uncontroversial that there is no such thing as a just genocide.